This whole project with the story of Konstantyn Bokan was actually a poster exhibit in the major project of the Holodomor that League had put together. I am a museum and art gallery junkie who goes to many, many exhibits just out of passion for audiovisual. Having understood the story, the content, and how heavy and how detailed the information has been collected, and how much problems and stress and propaganda against the Holodomor that's been put up by naysayers over the generations, over the decades. When I saw this one picture of this one family, for me, that personified everything about the Holodomor. Well, let me take a step back. When I was a kid, we had this lady who was our housekeeper. My dad was a doctor, mom worked in the office. Pani Karpenko would always get very upset if you never finished your food. And to the point of crying and very hysterical. So we always ate everything on our plate. It wasn't until after she had passed away that I found out that she lost her first two children and her husband to the Holodomor, but she never spoke about it. She also had the tattoos on her arms from the concentration camps. She never ever showed her arms. And again, the whole story was something that for me when I got involved with this was to honor the memory of people who were sharing the memories with us. So this project was basically 5 minutes to come up with a concept. It took me a couple weeks to find a 13-year-old kid who could do YouTube, who could put it together for me. And then by the grace of God, I met Pan and Pani Putsak from Tribe Printing. And their son, who's a teenager, became the voice and the personification of Konstantin. The value of this presentation for me was for children, because even though I've never had kids, my sister's a principal, and I understood that if we could each, if nothing else, teach the word Holodomor to children, they would understand at least something about their heritage and history. This, the story is basically all the key tenets of what happened during the Holodomor. I'd like for you to see the film, and I think it is basically self-explanatory. Dziękuję.
Any questions? Yeah, there's what ends up happening is methylation of certain parts of the DNA, which actually reduces the metabolism of the individual, which is basically a way to survive not having food. So the metabolism drops, even the ability to think drops, and actually the individuals who there's a cohort of individuals. There's a Dutch famine and a Chinese famine from the 40s and the 50s, which they followed the birth mothers and the children afterwards and see exactly what the effects were. And they found that individuals that were starved in the womb or in the first, second, third trimester, there's a higher increased frequency of affective disorder, schizophrenia, and also addictive disorders. But there's also an interesting part of that is we're looking at our rate of obesity. Our metabolism, for those people who have been starved, their metabolism has decreased, and now the effect of individuals, when we see food, we want to eat it. And not only that, now we're gaining weight, and our metabolism is not as good as it used to be, because that was a genetic defect from when the people were starved during World War II and other famines. So yes, there is a definite change in the DNA of individuals who have been starved.
But how would that affect the grandchildren? They also mentioned that these mothers couldn't conceive and that it affected the grandchildren also.
Well, the DNA changes in the starving mother and in the womb. So that DNA is now being transferred to their siblings. So we're only 3 generations out. We don't know what's going to happen in the 4th or 5th generation yet. So that's still to see. Now, what we are doing is, my wife, who's a psychologist, we're actually talking about trying to talk to the children of the Holodomor survivors, and they see exactly how it affected them in some way. Like my family was not part of the Holodomor, but we had survivor guilt. You know, why did we survive? So that's something else that we're actually looking into. There's a lot of things that we can get from all this information. We just have to move on. But since once genetics change, that adaptability continues on.
If I could just step in for a second, I found some real poignant commonalities in the two two projects that were shown here today. The video that we did for Ukrainian was geared towards children of grades 5 to grade 8. The whole concept of using the voice of a child is because the ustne historia, people hearing what Dida and Baba had gone through, it's one thing for a child to hear it from an adult or from an elder, but to actually hear the context of a voice and something they could relate to was a really compelling moment watching children actually watch the video. The whole purpose for what we were trying to do, the pictures that we were used were actually pictures that are taken out of, which were historically accurate, verified through the book. The actual storyline was basically a narration of the key points of what a person would have gone through. The physiology of starvation was something that I very much related to with your film. I wish I would have had that information before I started mine. But the bottom line for us was it's a continuing education, and by having two videos that address younger children and then high school and universities is a very compelling and I think fortuitous for us all to have you through with the film. Thank you very much.
Sure, thank you. I mean, it's great because, we can show your film to the younger, to the elementary school. And our film has already been shown to 9th grade and up, and to the universities. And one of the things that we also wanted to do is actually show this to our Ukrainian school studies on Saturdays. Because what we also found is, our students, our Ukrainian students, who learn about the Holodomor, sometimes they're not that assertive in schools to say that it is there or not. Like our daughter, she decided to do a term paper on the Holodomor, and her professor looked at her and said, "Is that really such a thing?" And she goes, "Well, yeah, there's such a thing." Well, show me the evidence. There's no evidence. And then she said, "Well, it was a genocide against Ukrainian people." And she also said, "Well, if that wasn't a genocide, I have to prove it's a genocide." So she went ahead and she did write it. So people with that bravery need to go out to universities and teach our professors and our teachers that it did exist and show them the evidence. She brought the Appleton book to him and said, "Okay, well, if this is a myth, how come all these people like Robert Conquest or James Mace, there's Anne Applebaum, all these people have been studying this, and so if that's a myth, then you need to discredit all those authors prior to that." So we need to make sure our children promote this in the schools, and hopefully that word will get out.
I have a question for you regarding your young narrator. I was very impressed by him. Did he give you any reflections on what it was like, reading your script?
The young narrator was 15 at the time. His name was Theodore Putsak. His father and mother are publishers. They own Trident Press, and they do a lot of work for the Ukrainian Vermont. He was a budding thespian who has managed to establish a pretty good career in the film industry here in Toronto. He and I actually sat down, and I just kind of laid out the story. He didn't say a word for 3 days, and then he came back and said, "I want to do this." The tone and the inflection, the scripting of the story took less than 5 minutes. But then it took me to find a teenager who could do the YouTube, glue it together, and then I found the Putsaks who had the professional whereabouts of machinery and tools and software to put it all together. Even the music was done by Mrs. Putsak. And so the whole thing was to evoke the whole sense of emotion, the physical pain as he's talking, going through the stages of the physiology of starvation. The timeline, to put it to July 1st, I pulled that as an arbitrary date, only to give you the sense of how long it takes to starve to death. The way he was talking, matter-of-factly, we weren't communist bashing. We had discussions about how much we wanted to keep it to the story. We tied in afterwards the fact that the father and the brother ended up dying in the Gulag. Just added a nice tie-in for the rest of the story. So the family tragedy wasn't just through 1932-33, went right up to the 39-40s. And so it's an ongoing kind of a process. We put in there where he's going through the Our Father. Again, there's an example of not being able to have a complete thought process. there's a certain benefit to having Wikipedia at your fingertips. I didn't have the benefit of a doctor, but we tried to get the point across. And he showed it to quite a number of schools where the kids are very young and rambunctious, disorderly. Within a minute or two of getting into the film, they're very serious, they're mesmerized by it. I've actually had really intelligent questions from 5-year-olds, 6-year-olds, 7-year-olds, which was really not edited, but really, really pulling on the heartstrings that they got it. And even if they don't know the politics or the total body count or the whole story of Stalin and what we've gone through, they get the understanding of what Holodomor was. And for me, just getting the word out there, Holodomor was from an awareness point of view. Now being able to take it into the higher grades and into the colleges and universities, I think this is a nice wraparound for the two of us. Yeah, thank you.
I mean, interesting,
Excuse me, gentlemen,
First-
would you be able to speak either louder or into the microphone?
Sorry.
We can hardly hear or understand what's going on.
Okay, sorry.
well, there is trying to find Holodomor survivors who are willing to talk about the Holodomor was also a little bit difficult. We found two. Fortunately, one of them was my godmother, but there were two of us, so that worked out great. But the two individuals I wish to speak with, they were gung-ho, but as soon as we brought in cameras, one developed a heart attack and refused to talk about it ever again, and the family told us never to come back again because Guido's going to pass away the second time we tried to talk about it. The second one, it was being built up for a week. I was going to come to his house, and he became so nervous that his name would go out there, that his family in Ukraine is also going to be attacked. He developed heart failure, also had a heart attack. So, because these are all people in their 90s. So it started stepping back and realizing that there's still a fear. Even in our family, we have members who had gone through the Holodomor, and they don't want their names out there because they still have that fear that still someone will come after them. Even now, even in 2019, they still have that fear.
In my personal situation, getting involved with the Holodomor is basically I got involved with the Holodomor out of survivor's guilt because she wasn't my mama, she was our housekeeper, and she never spoke about it. And it was only after the fact that she had passed away that I actually found out about her story. So for me, this is an attempt to give back to something that we weren't doing as a following generation.
I heard something that in a sociological process of starvation that in their early stages they're protesting about it, and then when when they start starving, it quiets down. And maybe like Venezuela, remember all the protests, and then like what happened to them? Is it something like, is it a similar pattern there?
Well, medically and psychologically, for the first 6 hours when you're starving or you're not having food, we get that term that's now in the Webster's dictionary, hangry. So people get angry because they don't have food. They get a little irritable. So people are irritable in the beginning. And they're looking for food, but then after about 3 or 4 days without food, you become a little bit more subdued, and you just sort of lose that energy because there's no more energy to fight. They do have bouts of euphoria. There are some people who will just become like almost like a bipolar. So they're very, very happy for a day or so, then they're very, very sad the next day. So it's like the body short-circuiting, I would say, as you're starving to death, not having enough energy. But eventually, just like Leonis Bruno mentioned, you're just going to lose all your energy. You're just going to want to sleep all day. And interestingly, the body still has an ability that once it senses food, you actually do wake up, and you can't wait to get to that food. But when you've starved significantly, any amount of food that you take in too quickly, you have to understand that after a certain amount of time, the gastrointestinal tract has atrophied. It can't absorb food like it used to. So as soon as you start eating something, you get diarrhea, you get dehydration, and you die from dysentery. Not because it's an infection, but because you can't absorb the amount of material in your body needs to produce 9 liters of fluid to digest food. And if you don't have that 9 liters, you're going to succumb to dehydration.